Good evening. I call to order this regular meeting of the Minnehaha County Planning Commission and will begin with a few introductory comments. As a courtesy to everyone here tonight, please make sure that all cell phones have been silenced. Please note that tonight's Planning Commission meeting will be rebroadcast via CityLink and posted on www.minnehahacounty.gov site by viewing by the general public. Any final action taken on the conditional use permit applications tonight will take effect 5 working days following this meeting, unless a written appeal of the Planning Commission's decision is filed in the Planning Office by Monday, August 31st, 2026 at 5 p.m. In the event of an appeal, the decision will be referred to the County Commission for a hearing on Tuesday, September 22nd, 2026 at or after 9 a.m. The affected parties will be notified of the meeting date, and meetings of the County Commission are held in this same room. First on the agenda is public input. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda? At this time, the Planning Commission will consider the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are perceived to be non-controversial and meet all of the requirements of the codes and regulations. The consent agenda will be acted on in one motion with no public hearing on the items unless a member of the public, the commission, or staff requests the item be removed from the consent agenda. Next, I'll read each item on the consent agenda and ask if there are any issues or comments from the Planning Commission or the audience. If any member of the Planning Commission or the audience would like to be heard on the item, please raise your hand and the item will be moved to the regular agenda to allow you to address the Commission later in the meeting. Any items remaining on the consent agenda will be approved by the Planning Commission with the conditions recommended by staff. Item number 1 on the consent agenda is approval of our minutes of July 27th, 2026. Item number 2 is conditional use permit 26-46 to allow a motor vehicle sales on the property legally described as Tract 1, Klein Addition, Southeast Quarter, Section 26, Township 101 North, Range 48 West. That is the Split Rock Township. The petitioner is Daniel Yanes. Property owner is Yanes Property, LLC. It is located at 26677 483rd Avenue. Anyone from the commission, staff, or audience wish to be heard on this item? Item number 3 is continual use permit 26-47 to allow a kennel. It's a dog grooming on the property legally described as the south 520 feet, the east 1,045 feet. There is an exception of sections Tract 1, end of exception, Southeast Quarter, Section 31, Township 102 North, Range 47 West. That is in Red Rock Township. Petitioner is Christy Huff. She's also the property owner. That is located at 48484 262nd Street. Anyone from the commission, staff, or audience wish to be heard on this item? Item number 4 is conditional use permit 26-49 to allow an accessory dwelling unit on the property legally described as Tract 1, Dickman Addition, Section 23, Township 101 North, Range 48 West. That is a Split Rock Township. Petitioner is Charles Dickman. Property owner is Teresa Kilburn, located at 26551 483rd Avenue. Anyone from the commission, staff, or audience wish to be heard on this item?
We were sitting in the back and we missed the second one about the dog kennel. We have questions about that.
Okay.
Property owners next to that.
Okay, I will remove it to the regular agenda.
Okay, our stuff's over here.
Okay, we'll move on to conditional use number 5. It's conditional use permit 26-50 to exceed 3,600 square feet of accessory building space, requesting 8,410 square feet on the property legally described as the northwest quarter, southwest quarter. There is an exception of H-2, H-3, and except Tract 1 of Marshall's Edition. End of exception. Section 7, Township 102 North, Range 49 West, that is in Mapleton Township. The petitioner and property owner is Vladimir Skinder, located at 25758 472nd Avenue. Anyone from the staff, commission, or audience wish to be heard on this item? Item number 6, conditional use permit 26-51 to transfer one building eligibility from the northeast quarter to southeast quarter. There is an exception of the north 990 feet, the east 660 feet, and of exception to the southeast quarter, the southeast quarter. There's another exception, the Solberg Edition, end of exception, all within Section 30, Township 103 North, Range 49 West. That is a Sverdrup Township. The petitioner and property owner is Jane and Lloyd Solberg, and it's located at a fourth of a mile north of the 255th Street and 473rd Avenue intersection. Anyone from the commission, staff, or audience wish to be heard on this item? Item number 7 is conditional use permit 26-52 to allow an agricultural related operation on the property legally described as Tract 4, Double D Edition, North Half, Northwest Quarter, Section 35, Township 103 North, Range 48 West. That is in Edison Township. The petitioner and property owner are Jesse Boyer. It is located at 48219 255th Street. Anyone from staff, commission, or audience wish to be heard on this item? Commissioners?
I make a motion to pass the consent agenda and move item number 3 to regular business.
I'll second.
I have a motion and second to approve the consent agenda except for number 3, which will be moved to the regular. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. If your item has been approved, you're free to go. Item number 3, Kevin?
Good evening, I'm Kevin Hookman from the County Planning Department. This property was brought to the attention of the Planning Department through a complaint that the property owner was doing a pet grooming business on the site. Staff did contact the property owner, Christy Huff, and she responded that she had previously had a mobile pet grooming unit, and then that has moved to an on-site unit at her hot place. The petitioner did pay double application fee for the permit request according to the ordinance. The property is located in between Brandon and Valley Springs. Oops, I'm going to find my site here. And it is a large residential acreage site. The property owner did submit a brief narrative that describes the dog grooming business, and it plans to have about 4 to 5 dogs per business day, and have operation run take place between 8:30 and 3 p.m. during normal work days. Dogs are seen only by appointment, and they are seen within the building that's, you can see in that picture there to the left. It's an outbuilding, a detached garage where the dogs are kept. Dogs will not be kept on site overnight. This is just for the grooming purposes, other than the owner's personal animals. In kind of the interest of time, I will. You have in front of you the conditional use permit criteria that has been reviewed beforehand as this has been sent out. Staff does recommend approval of the conditional use permit 2647 with 8 conditions. And I guess we can move on to the public testimony to see what questions are being asked. Are there any
Any-
questions?
Any questions for him?
No.
Okay. Is the petitioner here?
Well, I think the people that are building the kennel are here. We were just curious if it was just.
The petitioner needs to come forward first, please, if they're here. Please state your name and address.
Christy Huff. My address is 48484 262nd Street, Valley Springs, South Dakota.
Okay, anyone questions for her at this time? Okay, you may have to come up and address after the question. All right, you can come up now, but please state your name and address.
Donna Larson, Jerry Larson. We're neighbors that are property next to them, and we are fine with the dog grooming. We were just curious about the kennel. When it said /kennel, we were just concerned that it was gonna be an overnight type boarding kennel. And
So this can't get any bigger than this grooming thing that you're talking about at this point?
it's just for grooming, not kenneling overnight is what we're getting. Yeah, that's fine, that's cool with us. You should just come talk to us.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, we're good.
Got your okay, got your questions answered, okay?
Madam Chair, just real quick to just point out that that's actually condition 7, so that's baked into the permit as well, just a little bit of reinsurance.
Okay.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just confirming with staff that that is your understanding as well of how we wrote the conditions.
Yes, I was going to come up and point out that, yes, condition number 7 does have a limitation that there's no overnight kenneling of the dogs, but Mike Ralston stated that already, so, yes.
Okay,
Madam Chair, with those items clarified, I'll make the motion to approve with the conditions as recommended by staff.
Second that.
okay, I have a motion and a second to approve conditional use permit 26-47. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Any old business?
No.
Okay, we'll move on to new business. Scott is going to do a briefing on the draft ordinance for the data center regulations.
Thank you. Tonight, we're going to have a little discussion on wording or a proposed ordinance amendment, the wording for a proposed ordinance amendment, which would deal with data centers. And as you know, we have been working on this for a while. In April, we had a guest speaker that came and talked to us as a commission about data centers. That person had some expertise in the construction of data centers and provided some insight on the usage of them, how they operate, and so on. So that, with that in mind, since that time, I have, and our office has been crafting and looking at various ordinances throughout the region, the country, as well as researching online. And I have some wording for you to consider tonight, and that's been included in your packet. So I would encourage you to follow along as we go through this, and I'll explain step by step what is in the what I've prepared for you, and then we can have a discussion. You can stop me at any time and we can talk about it, because that's going to probably be the easiest. So the first, and I have a black and white copy, if that works better. Okay. So we'll be able to show this on the overhead as well for people in the audience. So I have 10 copies I'll hand out if you're going to share, if you'd like to share some. So here you go. This can all be found online as well. Here you go. You just can hand them out. So the first item is a definition, and I'll read the definition of a data center. A data center is a building or a group of structures used to house and maintain electronic hardware, computer systems, and associated components, such as telecommunication and data processing systems, to be used for the remote storage, management, processing, and distribution of electronic data. Examples of such data include, but are not limited to, computational intensive applications such as blockchain technology, cryptocurrency mining, weather modeling, genome sequencing, and etc. Such facilities may also include air handlers, power generation or generators, water, cooling, and storage facilities, utility substations, battery storage facilities, and other associated infrastructure to support operations. Any building over 500,000 square feet in area or larger and used as defined above shall be considered a hyper data center, would not be permitted. Common computer servers for business use are not considered a data center. So if you have, let's say you operate a greenhouse and you have 2 computers that you keep your database and stuff on, that's not considered a data center. So now, that's the definition.
Madam Chair, I think Scott's willing to take some questions along the way here and just make this kind of discussion oriented. So maybe taking a step back, Scott, just if this is a relatively new innovation and technology, one of the main ideas here is just to define our terms. And so as it stands today, we don't have anything in our zoning ordinance so maybe you can kind of set the stage for us, like why do we even need to do this? If someone were to apply to do something that fit this definition today, how would we handle it?
That's a good point. So I'll back up, and before, I should have, my excitement let me jump ahead. But so, right now, if someone were to come into the county right now and come into my office and say, I want to build a data center, they're not permitted. We have had a ruling, if you recall, we've had rulings from a judge here that says if a use is not specified in the zoning ordinance, it's not allowed. So right now, we don't allow data centers. We don't allow data centers in any specific zoning ordinance. However, that being said, there is still the caveat that you could apply for a planned development. We do have, I would say, what I would call one very small data center right now in the county. That is the SDN building that's at La Mesa. It's at La Mesa and Interstate 90. So if you're familiar with, there's a building there, and they store there. It's a data center, but it's like a backup facility for a redundancy facility for SDN communication. That could be considered a data center, and they applied for that through a planned development. And I think Cindy probably was here when she was a commissioner. That whole development included more than a data center, so it goes all the way down to Highway 38. And in their development plan, they also called for some business park development to occur along Highway 38. So it had a mixed use. So there was data center as well as some other uses. That's why it was appropriate for a planned development. So someone could come in right now and apply with a planned development to build a data center. The disadvantage of that, and what I'm trying to help provide some groundwork for, is I think that if someone were to come in for a planned development, it leaves the county more at risk, because we don't have defined criteria of what we expect from that developer. So once we go through this, you will notice that there's criteria for setbacks for residential buildings. There's criteria for sound mitigation plans to be submitted. There's criteria for wastewater, stormwater retention plans. So there's a lot of discussion in what I've proposed to address what could be perceived as issues with data centers. So does that help lay the foundation of where we are right now?
I think that's helpful to me. The other comment I was going to make on just, again, the definitions are pretty important here, would just be, you bring up the SDN communications facility, and that's in the modern issue set here today, that's a relatively small facility. And I think the concerns come from the hyperscale or whatever definitions we want to put on this. And so kind of, are there gradations of size that bring different sets of concerns? And as we're defining our terms, I see as we have it drafted here, and again, this is kind of a first draft to just start some conversations, we kind of set an upper limit on something that's about as big as these things can possibly come and say that's the upper limit. And then we kind of say common computer servers, so almost a de minimis exception, like if this is, but then everything in between is defined as a data processing center and would trigger a conditional use permit, is the contemplation right now.
That's correct. And I will also explain as we get into this, it is spelled out in here that any data center would still be it would still require a conditional use permit. And we would only be proposed to allow data centers to be located in the C commercial zoning district and both of our industrial. We have an I1 and an I2 industrial zoning districts. So it would be only allowed as a conditional use within those three zoning districts: commercial, light and heavy industrial, basically. So it would still come back. There's criteria that's set for you to consider, and then the benefit of having these as a conditional use is it gives us the ability to look at each one on a case-by-case scenario. And you, if you recall, as a commission, we've handled many things in this same way. Medical marijuana, we required that that's a permitted special use, so that is a little bit different. But if it doesn't meet the criteria, it becomes a conditional use. But like short-term rental, you remember we amended the zoning ordinance. They all have to come back to us as a conditional use permit. Accessory dwelling units, we saw one here on tonight that we approved, and that's been a relatively new addition to our zoning ordinance. So there are many things that work really well for us as a county to consider them as conditional use permits. So with that, would you like me to, Madam Chairman, to continue on with how I perceive this to be where it would go in the zoning ordinance and continue on?
Correct. Go ahead.
So then what I'm proposing are regulations to be added to Article 12. Article 12 of our zoning ordinance is the additional regulations, and that's where we have uses like confined animal feeding operations, sand and gravel operations, short-term rentals. So it's specific, it's additional uses that occur in the county. And this is what I would say is a specific, special, it's a unique use. And so we want to address it in that section. So we would create our Article 1221. So it would be there are 20 other additional uses that we deal with. And this would be 21. And then I have created a number of criteria that I'll go over that we can discuss. The first regulation that deals with data centers is the intent. And what I have written is it's the intent of regulations for data centers to encourage the development of technology, facilities while protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public. That's the intent. Then we go on to B, which is data centers shall only be permitted to operate on lands zoned C commercial, I-1 and I-2 industrial with the issuance of a conditional use permit. And that's what I had just indicated to you. It will be a conditional use only within those 3 zoning districts. Then we get into 1 through 8 or 10, and those are items that they would need to, that any applicant would need to meet or be aware of when they're applying for a data center conditional use permit. The first one are the setbacks. And this is something that we need to talk a little bit about because I modeled this on several other ordinances that I saw. Data centers and all equipment and structures shall be set back at least 1/2 mile, that's 2,640 feet, from all dwelling units, schools, churches, or parks measured from property boundary to property boundary, except in those instances where a waiver is secured from the affected landowners within that 1/2 mile setback. Now, this is something that I want your guidance on. Do you want to measure from property boundary to property boundary, or do you want to measure from the structure to structure? So it'd be from the structure of the data center to the closest residence, the actual physical house, or do you want to measure to the property lines?
Madam Chairman,
Go ahead, Cindy.
what's the setbacks on the property of the data center from the data center property line to the building?
Well, the minimum in those zoning districts would be 50 feet from the front, and I think 30 feet on the rear, and I think 20 feet on the sides. So you could be as close as 20 feet, basically, if it was a side property line to the edge of the property. But, it's hard to anticipate how they might be laid out on a property, because you're gonna need parking, and there's gonna be, when we get into this, there's some requirements for fencing and such. But the current setback would be 50, 20, or 30 in the rear and 20 on the sides.
And then my other question would be if you're going to do from property boundary to property boundary, if it's in the rural county, is the property boundary my 40 acres that has corn on it?
Yes. If you had a house on that, 40 acres, and the rest of it was corn, we would measure to the edge of that property. And your house may be 600 feet back, so it would be in addition to that. But it would be a 1/2 mile from property line to property line. So that's one thing I wanted your guidance on, if you'd like to go from property line to property line, or would you like to go from structure to structure? So you can think about that.
And Madam Chair, my contribution to that is I think you get less strange results by going from the building in question to the structure in question. You get some of those outlier situations, especially in our rural areas where the property line extends far beyond what you're trying to protect. So I think that's what we need a little bit more thought around, is what are we trying to protect from what? You're not necessarily trying to just protect open land or exactly how the data center's situated on its land, but so I think I would lean towards structure to structure, and I think we also just need more conversation on the setback length in question. Why a 1/2 mile instead of a mile, or a 1/2 mile instead of a 1/4 mile? Like, some of these at least are somewhat arbitrary when you're first starting the conversation. So that's no fault of yours, Scott, but just looking for what other analogous items in our different conditional uses and why we pick the number we pick. Is this analogous to a CAFO for certain noise odor issues? Is it analogous to some other use? Also, I know you researched other regulations around the country too, and why they settled on certain numbers. I think we just need a little bit more research to feel like we have a grounding, but you've provided a starting point for the conversation, so I appreciate that.
So I'll continue on, and if we need to circle back to the setbacks on item 1, we can. The second item is illumination and security. As part of the conditional use permit application, the applicant would be required to submit a lighting plan, and that plan would provide details of the light spread and intensity. They'd have to provide diagrams of the light spread and intensity, the fixtures, specifications, the mounting height details. Any light used for outdoor illumination on the property shall be fully cut off fixtures so the light does not shine upwards nor adversely impact adjoining properties. Then the security portion of number 2 is B, a secure chain link or solid wood or masonry fence at least 6 feet in height shall be constructed and maintained around the entire data center building. All fencing shall conform with Article 12.01. That's our fence regulations.
Madam Chairman?
Go ahead, Cindy.
Going to go back to lighting just a second, Scott. So this would be our basic regulations if we use that. So when we come to a conditional use permit, can we tighten that up at all, or would it need to be in here? My thought is there a curfew on non-security lighting that could be, say, from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m., all non-secure use lights would be turned off? Or, I mean, I know we haven't done that on some of the other stuff we've done, but this is kind of a different animal.
Well, I would say yes, you could do both. You could add it to this, and you can always add conditions to a conditional use permit. So it's whatever you feel is going to. If there's a strong if there's a strong feeling from the commission that you'd like them to shut lights off from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., let's say, I would put it in here, because staff changes over time, planning commissioners change over time, and that just habit of putting that in a condition could be lost.
And my only thought on turning off lights was non-security related lighting. Maybe it's an advertising sign or something, I don't know. And I don't know if that, I mean, that's something we could talk about.
It's something to consider.
think about.
And playing the devil's advocate, I could easily see someone saying, all of these lights are for security. And then how am I going to to do any kind of enforcement? How am I going to say, no, that's not a security light? That's part of the frustration of doing enforcement is someone comes to you and says, well, aren't that all the lights are security lights? So something to consider. The third item is noise. The noise level of data centers shall not exceed 55 decibels as measured at any property line. That would be the property line for the facility, the data center. And then there are several other criteria under noise. A, all data centers shall submit a pre-construction sound modeling plan from a licensed engineer and noise mitigation plan at the time the conditional use permit application, containing at a minimum the following. 1, a list of all sound sources that contribute to the overall sound emission from the site, and 2, data showing the anticipated noise level at all property boundaries. B, the applicant shall provide post-construction field tests from a licensed engineer verifying compliance of what they had submitted, the pre-construction sound modeling plan. And C, all emergency generators shall be housed in a high-level acoustic enclosures to dampen sound. D, the county reserves the right to require independent verification noise measurement and/or request additional measurement at different points on the property. The one thing I wanted to talk about is C a little bit. And what if you feel that the wording enclosures, what that means? Because a fence is an enclosure, or is a building an enclosure? Do you want them inside a building? I know the devil is in the details, and I don't want someone to say, well, I have a chain link fence and that's an enclosure. So do you want it to specify a building, or what kind of an enclosure?
When you say high-level acoustic enclosure, to me, that says it would have to be a building automatically because the chain link isn't high-level
That's true.
acoustic. And so I think the definition is in there.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may, just to kind of add another point to that, if the intent is we're measuring at the property line anywhere at 55 decibels, I think that's the finite line, right?
That's
So
correct.
whatever that enclosure is made up of, it needs to ensure that that decibel reading doesn't exceed that at the property line.
That's correct.
anyway. So
So you think we're covered then?
I feel that
Okay.
way, yeah.
I just wanted to throw that out there so we discuss it.
The comment that I'd throw in, I think the backup generators and whatnot is sometimes cited as one of the noisiest parts of this operation. So I think we're calling out attention to it. But to Mike's point, if they can put a comprehensive plan together for however they enclose or shield sound, so long as they're meeting, I think, three proper in our numbering system here, as long as they're meeting that, in some sense, we'd grant some kind of flexibility within their plan to achieve that. I think so I don't know that the shall language is what we're going for, but somehow we're maybe needing more information around those. Again, like the frequency of the testing of the generators, things like that where that those are going to kick on with some regularity, and is that the peak noisiness of the facility is when those kick on. So I think it's good to address the generators, but the overall noise control is what you're going for, and you're seeking them to manage it accordingly. And then finally, that part D, we reserve the right to require independent verification of those various measurements.
So should I move on to 4? Okay. The fourth item is the utility capacity and resource accountability. The applicant, so A, under that, 4A, the applicant shall submit a comprehensive water study, including that source of any water used, and demonstrate that water needs will not drain local groundwater or disturb existing users. If connected to any existing water system, the applicant shall provide documentation from the water provider that there is sufficient water capacity for the proposed data center. And then B deals with power. The applicant shall provide a power source plan and grid connection plan at the time of application. The plan shall include a statement from the utility provider that adequate capacity is available on all lines and substations to ensure capacity is available to serve the needs of the data center. Okay, so any issues with 4, which is the utilities and resource accountability?
Question.
Yeah.
So would we do a yearly check on those water consumptions and power measurements just to make sure that they're staying within guidelines, because they can provide that data?
Well, at this point, it's not written in that way. Would you like it added? So, because as you're aware, we do require other conditional uses like CAFOs where you have to do well monitoring of groundwater. So we do get reports annually from several CAFOs that their lagoons aren't leaking.
I mean, I guess I think that they already probably do them on their own, and there's a way to do them, from what a little bit I've read about it, that they can check what the water and power consumption is on a yearly, and that could be reported in their annual report.
So would you like that added as a commission? Where do you stand? I can add something about that an annual report be provided to the planning department on the water usage and power, on the power consumption.
And that may be a theme we want to apply to all of the conditions, some aspect of ongoing accountability. I don't know that it applies to any one issue. I mean, obviously, if they're in violation of any of our conditions, we can always recall the conditional use permit, but I think just to build transparency and that data is being shared with the county. We also have to stay in our lane. Of course, some of the concerns that sometimes we hear about power consumption is things like utility rates and things like that. That wouldn't be our jurisdiction. You know, that would be the PUC or potentially the legislature. Not us, but so long as we're staying in our lane of land use and making sure, I think that's reasonable to ask for some kind of ongoing report. But we might have to just look at the document holistically. What are those things that could lend itself to some kind, and if we have any other analogous situations where we ask for them, you mentioned a CAFO situation where maybe we ask for some kind of report. And
Well, and you always can add that as a condition in the conditional use permit, that they provide an annual report on whatever you want.
And there may be other things other than
Okay.
power and water consumption. Those are two that I
Okay.
scribbled out, but that's, maybe put it in our side notes or
All
something.
right, I
that
have it
we-
noted. I have it noted.
Okay.
Item number 5 is the design and massing standards. This is going to be generally aesthetic issues that deal with the building and how the building looks. And that would be A, all buildings exceeding 100 feet in length or width shall break up their mass every 100 feet by using architectural recesses, material changes, or color shifts. That's so you don't have like one gigantic white box. B, unfinished aluminum, vinyl siding, and T1 through 11 siding shall not be permitted on exterior finishes. C, the use of cargo containers, railroad cars, semi-truck trailers, and other similar storage containers for any component of the operation is strictly prohibited. This was an issue that came up with cryptocurrency mining, that they can do that right out of a cargo container. They just plunk them down and start cryptocurrency mining, and you can get 20 or 30 of them, and it just does not look very aesthetic. D is the color of all equipment and buildings shall be unobtrusive, non-reflective, and earth tone in color. E, this is probably one of the more important ones, in my opinion. E, the distribution lines and power poles. All on-site electrical wires associated with the data center shall be installed underground, except where the wiring is brought together for interconnection to system components and/or local utility power grid, and maintained in conformance with the National Electric Safety Code or other applicable codes. So this would basically say you don't have power poles running all over the place. It's primarily underground until it connects to the grid. And then finally, F, all data center buildings shall meet the requirements of the most current county-adopted edition of the International Building Code and meet all fire code requirements. And I think this is important to note, that fire code is always an issue in the county because we do not have enough water pressure to provide sprinkler systems. That's not to say that if you were to have a very well-funded data center, like maybe a Meta or an Amazon or Google, that they could physically build their own water suppression system to provide sprinkler systems. But that is going to be, once you get to a certain size of a building, under our building code, under the code that we have adopted, it has to be sprinkled. And the burden is going to be on those developers to determine how they're going to be able to sprinkle that. It may not be water because of the electronics. Maybe it'll be chemical suppression. But it will have to meet the fire code requirements, and if they can do that with chemicals, then that may be an option. But I've written that so they meet the code. So that's 5. That's the design and massing standards, the aesthetics of what we want it to look like. The 6th condition, or the 6th criteria condition, are roads, and this is something that we often do with a lot of our conditional use permits, is we have them work with the road district or the road entity that provides services to make sure that those roads are adequate for that proposed use. And as you may as you probably already understand this, that the majority of activity is going to occur when it's being constructed. Once these things are constructed, there's not a lot of traffic. It's not a lot of customer traffic coming and going. So there are some employees that will work there, limited. There may be some ongoing maintenance, but the majority of activity is going to occur when it's being constructed, and that's heavy equipment. Cement trucks, many cement trucks, and delivering components and so on. So, with that in mind, A, under roads, prior to commencement of construction, the permittee, which is the data center, shall identify all state, county, township haul roads that will be used for the data center project, and shall notify the governing body having jurisdiction over the roads to determine if a haul road identified to determine if the haul roads identified are acceptable. The governing body shall be given adequate time to inspect the haul road prior to use. Where practical, existing roadways shall be used for all activities associated with data center construction. Where practical, all-weather roads shall be used to deliver concrete and all other heavy components to and from the data center site. And then B, the data center shall, prior to use of the approved haul road, make satisfactory arrangements with the appropriate governing body having jurisdiction over the approved haul road for construction of the data center, for the maintenance and repair of the haul roads that will be subject to extra wear and tear due to transportation of equipment and components. The permittee shall notify the county planning department of such arrangements. That's basically a haul road agreement. So they will need to strike a deal and make sure that the governing body of whatever roads they're using are informed and on board with the use of those roads. Any issues, any additions we should add to roads? Okay. 7 is soil erosion and sediment control plans. There's only one item, A. The permittee shall develop a soil erosion and sediment control plan prior to construction and submit that plan to the county planning department. The erosion and sediment control plan shall address the erosion control measures for each project phase and shall at a minimum identify plans for grading, construction of the data center, detailed designs features to maintain downstream water quality, a comprehensive revegetation plan to maintain and ensure adequate erosion control and slope stability, and to restore the site after temporary project activities, and measures to minimize the area of surface disturbance. This is under state law. I just will remind you that under current South Dakota state law, Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources, you are required to get a general permit if you disturb more than 1 acre. So this is already somewhat baked into state law. However, if let's say they were disturbing less than 1 acre, or 3/4 acre chunks in phases, we still would require them to have a soil erosion plan and a sedimentation plan. Any discussion on 7? Okay. 8. 8 is the drainage and stormwater management plan. And I think this is important for us to consider. We've been in drought. It seems like we have dry periods, and we're in a little bit of a dry period right now, but it's not untypical for us in South Dakota to have a thunderstorm where you may get a downpour of 2 inches or 3 inches at a time. And let's just say you have a data center that has 6 acres of rooftop. That is a lot of water that is going to be rushing all at once off that rooftop. And so I think we need to really be mindful of the drainage and stormwater retention or stormwater management plan. So with that in mind, 8 is the drainage and stormwater management plan. The applicant shall provide a drainage plan prepared by a licensed engineer indicating how stormwater runoff from the data center building and all paved surfaces shall be accomplished so as not to increase the downstream flows during, and that should say a 10-year storm event. So a 10-year storm event is about a 3 to 4 inch event at once, and in a given time, and I'm not sure exactly if that's a 30-minute period or a 10-minute period, but there is specific parameters by the National Weather Service on what a 10-year storm event is for specific areas in the county. So how do you feel about 8, the stormwater, the drainage and stormwater management plan?
Any comments? Okay,
Okay.
move on.
All right. Number 9, emergency response plan. Before I get into this, I will preface this by saying I did reach out to our local emergency manager, Jason Gearman, and asked him, do you feel it's appropriate? Is this something, this is on the horizon? Do you feel that you would like to be involved with having some kind of management plan? And he indicated yes, that he felt it was important. So number 9 is emergency response plan. And there's a couple different things. A, the applicant shall submit an emergency response plan prior to any ground disturbance at the project site, detailing the planned response action that will be taken by facility representatives in the event of an emergency. And those actions are intended to minimize health risks to personnel and people in the surrounding community, as well as minimize adverse impacts to the environment. And then number 1, the plan shall include, but it's not limited to, a detailed narrative of response procedures and facility representatives responsible for management of the following plausible contingencies that could occur at the facility: natural disasters and severe weather, fire, security incidences, capacity and transmission, environmental, chemical, pipeline, if applicable, and medical issues. It shall include procedures for a site evacuation, designated egress routes, and emergency staging areas. Number 2, the plan shall include a standalone section detailing the emergency response protocol specific to battery energy storage areas, if applicable. So if they have battery backups, we need a plan on how they are going to address those in an emergency. Is there other issues on number 9? Oh, I'm sorry, there's 3 more. There's 3 and 4. The plan shall be developed in coordination with local first responders, the Minnehaha Community Emergency Management. And number 4, notwithstanding anything in this section to the contrary, the applicant may redact confidential or proprietary information from any submissions hereunder, which deals with their proprietary issues within their building. Any discussion on emergency response plan or how we should deal with that? I think I tried to cover natural disasters and potentially man-made disasters. And then number 10 is decommissioning and restoration plan. The Planning Commission may require a decommission and/or restoration plan as part of the conditions of approval. Consideration will be given to require the dismantling and removal from the site all generators, transformers, overhead and underground cables, foundations, buildings, and auxiliary equipment, the depth of 4 feet. The permittee shall be required to restore and reclaim the site to its pre-project topography and topsoil quality. In addition, a reclamation bond to cover all costs associated with the decommissioning of the facility may be required to be submitted to the county and retained by the auditor's office during the operation of the data center. And that can vary because it will depend on the size of the building and what it might take to decommission something. That's why I didn't want to put a figure in there, because if you said $100,000, that may not cover anything. It may be millions of dollars. And so if you feel that a decommissioning bond is required, it's there for you to consider. Any issues with decommissioning and restoration plan?
Cindy?
So in the ordinance, it says may be required, and that would be a discussion then at our conditional use.
Yeah.
And the commission could decide at that point if this particular unit needed to have
That's
something.
correct. It sort of felt like, well, I just was very concerned about putting a number in there because it's hard to anticipate how much something might cost. And I think we may need specific data from whatever applicant on the cost of something to reclaim something. And you certainly could require an engineer to give you an estimate on what it would cost to reclaim something. But, okay. So that concludes what I have prepared. That's not to say that this is I tried to think of things that would come up. I hope I covered most of them. Does anyone have any other issues that you think we should be addressing, or that somehow was omitted in what we would like to regulate?
Cindy?
In our first definition, where it says any building over 500,000 square feet or larger is considered a hypercenter and wouldn't be permitted. I'm just wondering, does it, do we need to put in there like the size? So if they're over X number of kilowatts, that's not allowable in our county? Or is that getting too far in the details?
Well,
I don't know.
I can certainly craft it that way if that is what you feel is appropriate. I would have to do more research on, I don't know what that threshold would be, to be honest with you.
No, I
because-
don't either.
So
That's why I'm
I would have
asking.
to ask around on what threshold a kilowatt of power would be unacceptable. And thinking about this, my first thought is, wouldn't that be something that the electrical company would naturally, wouldn't that be something that they would be in control of? If they don't have the power to provide the extra power, then I'm not sure.
So,
I can look into it.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Mike.
just a thought on that too. Not to say they don't want us to be underhanded, but in theory, could someone, if we don't have another regulation, another fine point, say, well, I'm gonna build two 400,000 square foot buildings, so I'm not considered a hypercenter. That would be my only fear of defining just as building size is the only
Well,
parameter.
We could, so I guess one option, one consideration is you could say, well, there's a lot of ways to be underhanded is the problem. You could say you're limited to 300,000 square feet per lot. But the problem is you could just subdivide it into 5 lots and you could have
Right.
a 300,000 square foot building on each lot. You could do something like we do with cell towers, where you have a distance, you can't have cell towers have to be a certain distance from each other. So maybe that's something that you'd like to regulate, is you can't have one data center can't be closer than a certain distance to another data center. We do that for cell towers. So that's something, if you would like, I can put that in there somewhere.
Go ahead, Cindy.
And I said kilowatts, and I should have said megawatts, because megawatts is where you're at, not kilowatts.
Yeah. Well, I can, if you'd like me to research the power consumption and if that's regulated in other jurisdictions, I can do that.
And also, is that a PUC question? I don't know if that's our jurisdiction or not. I'm just raising the question, so maybe look into that.
I can ask around and see what I can find out and come back and report to that.
And Madam Chair, maybe what I'm hearing from my colleagues is maybe a multifactorial analysis of size. Like the square footage of the building is just one element, maybe the power usage. So again, I keep coming back to like, this is a definition we're making from scratch here, and are we contemplating everything within its component parts, and is there truly an upper limit, and is there a floor that it's too small for us to regulate? It doesn't meet what we're doing here. So how do we define the size involved? It's too small, it's de minimis, and so do we build a little bit more into that? And then is there truly an upper limit? And then are there even gradations within that trigger more concerns? Again, if the SDN facility is one of our lodestars, that this is a reasonable addition to our community. I have not heard the public outcry in the years, if not decade, that's been there. So is that seen as suitable land use, and does that set a precedent that then something that size needs less regulation, whereas what's the tipping point that some of these other provisions trigger? So we might just need to wrestle with that, and what are the other than just square footage of a building, are there other that multifactorial definition of size, and does that trigger all of these component parts that follow? So just, the interrelationship between the conditional use elements and the definition of what we're dealing with, because it just seems like there's a really large range of potential options, which I think lends itself to a conditional use permit, because then you can take it, the context, you can take it case by case analysis, and some things will just not apply to a potentially smaller operation, and it gets approved much easier than a bigger operation is going to implicate more provisions. But I am kind of wrestling still with just some of the definitional matters, and then I think we're going to need to sit with and make some other comparisons to setbacks is in kind of my notes. A lot of the other elements are just very similar to other conditional use permits that we're familiar with, so I kind of track with everything else there, but I can see us needing to both take some public comment here tonight, just digest this for a while. I don't think there's some urgency that we have to get this, next month we have to bring this back in final form. I think this can take 2 to 3 months to weigh on each section. And but then maybe, Scott, you can help us. What would the next step be if this was this is exactly what we wanted? Just what are the next steps? How do you format this? Because I think we have to pass a zoning text amendment for commercial, for industrial 1, industrial 2. So there'd be multiple pieces of a puzzle.
That's correct. So ultimately, what'll happen is when you settle upon the final wording that you would like, I would have you authorize me, or you'd give me authorization to publish a hearing notice in our 4 local papers, and we would have a formal hearing on a text amendment to change our zoning ordinance. And at that point, it's relatively formal. I mean, I go through the proposed ordinance amendment, and then you have public testimony, and then you take formal action on it, and you make a recommendation to the county commission, and then we move it on to the county commission, and we go through the same process at the county commission. They authorize the auditor to publish the hearing notice, and then they have a hearing, and there's public testimony, and then they take some kind of action, and that action is referable to if people would like, they can gather signatures and refer that action and ordinance to a vote if they're unhappy with it.
And Madam Chair, another clarifying question just for Scott and for the benefit of our audience on procedural matters. Most likely a data center proposal might be a 2-step process where a site selection might occur, and then they would have to rezone the property if it isn't already zoned to commercial I-1 or I-2, and then that would just be a rezoning, and then they would have to apply for a conditional use permit.
That's correct.
So there's multiple steps.
Multiple steps, and I would say we have a very recently adopted comprehensive plan, and it's clearly spelled out in there what areas are appropriate for commercial and industrial development. Those are like interstate interchanges, the intersection of 2 major highways, rural service areas. It's not like you can just go out to the middle of Grand Meadow Township and buy 200 acres and rezone it to commercial, because the land use, the infrastructure isn't there to support 200 acres of industrial or commercial. So we try to locate those in areas that are suitable. So yes, you'd have to, you potentially would go through a rezoning, and then there'd be a subsequent step of a conditional use permit. But I also want to remind the county commission and the audience that once you rezone something to commercial, you open the door to all of the permitted uses that are in that commercial zoning district. That it could be a truck stop, you could have retail stores, those are all permitted uses. You could have, types of, you could have a bar. There are many, many uses that are allowed in commercial zoning districts. And you can't say, so that's why you have to be also aware that when you rezone property, it has, there's a lot of power behind that because it opens it to a lot of different uses that you may not contemplate at this very moment.
Any other questions, Cindy?
Just a comment for the audience. If you weren't aware of our April 27th meeting, when we had an informational meeting on data centers, you can watch it. Just go to minnehahacounty.org and go to the planning and zoning and find their video. And it's on that meeting, April 27th, and it starts at approximately 1 hour and 17 minutes into it. That's not probably quite right. I didn't get the exact time, but that's about approximately where, and I'm thinking it was like 25 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, we had a good discussion.
It was very interesting. If you want to listen to it, we didn't have an audience that night. No one came to listen but us. So anyway.
All right, that concludes my presentation. If you'd like, I think I have some ideas of what you would like. I will work on that and bring this back. It will not come back as you have not authorized me for a public hearing. That will come back as another discussion item, which will allow us to free form on this and dialogue back and forth on how we want it crafted.
Okay. Any other questions for him? Any other comments?
I have one more
Cindy, go
comment
ahead.
that maybe we could think about, and this while we're thinking about things, and that is, do we want to put together a citizens advisory board? So,
Well, that would be at the discretion of either an elected official, like the chairman of the planning or chairman of the county commission could put together an advisory board, or the chairman of the planning commission also has the authority to do like a citizens advisory board of whoever they would like to work on this. I mean, we did that with our comprehensive plan when we were tackling specific issues like density zoning and building eligibilities. And so we have done that in the past. It just takes a little bit more work because you have to find the people that are willing to serve and then get everyone's schedules together and then have the material prepared for them to review when it works for everyone to meet. But we've done it in the past.
maybe just something for consideration for our next meeting.
Okay. Commissioners, anything else? Okay.
So
thank
now,
you.
Bonnie, it's up to you to decide how long you'd like to allow for public discussion or input on our discussion item. So I'll
Okay.
turn that over to you.
Thank you, Scott. I have made a decision with you, the public, for any public comment. I'm going to allow 1 hour. I also want to remind you that this is not an action item, and no action will take place at this meeting. This meeting is actually an informational meeting between our planning staff and our planning commission. We still have a lot of work to do on it, and it could take quite a few months yet. And I'm not so sure, I think an advisory committee could be put together, but that would make it last a whole lot longer. I mean, I've been on plenty of those myself, and it's just an extended period of time with a lot of people and timeframes. That goes without saying. Now, I'm going to ask for a raise of hands of people that might want to speak. Okay? Huh? Yeah. Okay, the only thing that you will be, you'll be limited to 5 minutes. And that's the normal procedure for anybody with public input.
Please give us your name and address for the record.
Yes. So step forward, one at a time, and state your name and address.
Good evening, Madam Chair, council members, commissioners. My name is Jennifer McNamara. I currently live in Lincoln County, work in Minnehaha County, and have family property and business in Minnehaha County, and have been watching all of this, and I just wanted to comment that the public appreciates that you are working to more adequately define the difference between a data center and a hyperscale data center. Those discussions need to be continued, because we're all going to complain about whatever you decide to do, and we're going to use our phones to do it. We recognize the irony in that. And we also recognize that we're a major medical center, Sioux Falls, for the tri-state area, and that we already have major data centers supporting those and our banking industry. But what we're wanting to avoid is the hyperscale data centers that tend to be very destructive environmentally. They do not provide jobs, and they do not bring any income to our area. Something that I would like to see considered when you talk about the parameters of what allows them in or out might be a consideration of who is behind the ownership. I'm not sure if something could be drafted that says a percentage or a majority percentage of the company ownership needs to be resided within the state of South Dakota. There are other industries and states that host laws like that. There's actually a lot of medical laws in North Dakota related to that you can review. It has to do with the same thing as South Dakota. But if the ownership was not necessarily a Google or an Amazon or a Meta, if there was some partnership that actually showed us whoever's making the money is spending their money at home, is spending their money here with us. And so that should be a consideration. I also speak for all the people that can't be here tonight and the people in the other room and such, that generally our gut reaction is to tell you, just say no. There will be people that will come and we will keep knee-jerking and emotionally saying, just say no, we don't want any more data centers. And none of us are saying, say no to more business or growth. You've seen with the Sioux Falls City Council talking about if we want to grow, we have to go. We have to keep doing these things. We understand that, but we do want to be understood that we're seeing what the hyperscale is. I don't know. I've had family in South Dakota that farms. We have the wind, the sun, and the ground here. I'm not sure why we need to mine imaginary money. Is that really what South Dakota is about? Is cryptocurrency or high dollar investments for people that don't live here, work here, spend their money here, pay their taxes here, help their neighbors here? I wouldn't have as much opposition if any of these people were my neighbors trying to improve their life or our lives. So considering the ownership of these, considering the environment, and for all of us that are coming forward and standing here and just keep saying no, that's what we're saying no to. We're saying no to outside coming in and being destructive to our properties and our way of life. We do understand that you understand data center versus hyperscale data center, and we hope that you understand that we do too, but your heart just wants to say no. So, but we do appreciate also your explanation at the beginning of how that we can do input at these meetings. The Planning Commission is different. County Commission is different, things like that. The more explanation of that really helps all of this go through. And also moving this to a regular agenda item so that we can speak. So wish you all well in whatever comes next. Good night.
Good evening. My name is Jean Childs, and I live in Minnehaha County. The city commission, whatever it's called, the city council, we're unhappy. You have nothing to do with this, but the city council, we were unhappy because we felt that a hyperscale data center was rushed under the carpet and we weren't given enough time. The reason I bring that up is background. We appreciate the effort a much better effort to plan this out carefully and to consider all the ifs, ands, or buts. So, well, I appreciate that. I speak for myself. I hear comments. We may require this, we may require that, we may require an engineer cost estimate and all that. I'd like you to replace, every time it's may require, to replace that with shall require. Because commissioners have a tendency to say, no, we're not going to require it, it's not necessary. And all these things that may be required pretty much should be required. Rezoning, I was unhappy with the rezoning of, I don't know exactly, but the rezoning for this so-called hyperscale data center that was kind of descending upon us suddenly. I was unhappy of the rezoning to a light industrial. We need to really clarify what that means. Light industrial? To me, that's like a little a shop where they do brake work or something like that. So let's be really clear on what light industrial, if we ever consider rezoning from residential to that. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, Julia Natvig. I live at 4909 South Greystone in Sioux Falls. I too appreciate all this pre-planning, and I just have two considerations for the city planners. One is noise. In my past pre-retirement life, I did industrial noise measuring, and the sound parameters set 85 decibels is harmful to human hearing, 55 at the property line is reasonable, but that is the scale in human hearing, which is 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. The low frequency hum produced by these data centers, which I don't know how loud it would be in a medium-sized one, but these are called subacoustic noise. It is not stopped by sound barriers. It penetrates through walls, it penetrates through glass, it penetrates through berms and travels long distances. You don't hear it, you feel it. You feel it as vibrations, pressure in your chest, your stomach, some people in their heads. Often it increases cortisol production, and causes anxiety. And this is not measured by your standard sound level meter. That is what's called, and most of them run on an A-weighted or C-weighted scale to catch the hertz range of normal hearing. In order to hear these low subacoustic noises, you need a G-weighted sound level meter, and that's probably not something you have in your shop. You're probably going to have to call in someone with a special meter in order to measure this sound, and you're probably going to have to go beyond a half a mile once this is up and running, or a comparative type data center to know is this allowable or not. I don't know if a half mile would be sufficient to protect people, animals from that. The other is the cooling water. It's not as big a problem with this as it would be with a hyperscale, but if you use closed-loop cooling water, it has a lot of chemicals in it to stop corrosion and keep the pH right. It also includes the glycols, which are your energy transfer. It takes, it's like in your refrigerator and your heat exchangers. These, when dumped into a water treatment system, they rapidly undergo microbial action, which depletes the dissolved oxygen, which is what is needed to keep a water treatment plant working properly. So I think we also need some parameters set up about rules about discharging any kind of cooling water into our sewage treatment center. Either have it pumped into a truck and taken off site, sufficiently diluted, or else chemically treated on site before it's sent into our water treatment system at levels that perhaps could disrupt our system. But anyway, I really appreciate that you all are getting ahead of the ball on this. Thank you very much.
There may be a source in the packet that...
Ma'am, please state your name and address.
There might be a source in the packet that one of our volunteers handed out to you guys about more about infrasound. I hope it was included in there. My name is Susie Pratt. I am a member of South Dakota for Data Center Transparency. We did not anticipate having public comment on this item tonight, and we shared it as a listening opportunity. So I would like to first thank you guys for trying your best to accommodate us this evening and allowing us to speak. I really appreciate that, and I'm sure everybody in this room does too. I come to you as mom and a community member first and foremost, but tonight I also come representing South Dakota for Data Center Transparency. We have over 4,000 members statewide and are still growing. We worked hand in hand with Let Sioux Falls vote on the petition to take the rezoning of the Gemini site to a public vote. I would like to formally introduce myself and reiterate that we are not an anti-data center group, although we have members all over the spectrum and do provide an open forum for residents to discuss them. That being said, we do recognize that hyperscale facilities have distinct differences and unique hurdles for municipalities to navigate when compared to your traditional enterprise level facilities. These hurdles have ultimately become a learning opportunity for communities across the nation. Some of these lessons have been harder to learn than others. That being said, we feel that these ordinances are a really good start. But after polling some more of our active members, the consensus is that there are some areas that these can be strengthened, as you know, because this is a rough draft. I would invite you guys to continue working with the committee, with the community, and I think a citizen advisory board is an excellent idea to continue working with the community to meet their needs, and our coalition would love to offer you any insights or assistance we have gathered over the last year. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Caitlin Music. I am here representing Dakota Rural Action, a community dedicated to speaking up for our people, our environment, and our natural resources. Thank you so much for allowing public input tonight. As Susie mentioned, we were not prepared to speak, but we are so happy to be able to do so, and we appreciate your understanding and flexibility. I want to thank you for asking the questions that we are all asking, including what are we trying to protect from what? I believe Mr. Kipley asked that one, and I would like to pull it a little bit out of context and say that we are here as neighbors and community members to protect our neighbors and community members from million-dollar corporations who have no incentive to be good neighbors in return. And so that is why we are all here today. I am so thrilled that we are talking about this. I love that it's on a new agenda item. We just have some concerns lying primarily with the definitions in the ordinances. We know how to define hyperscale data centers. We can define water usage. We can put restrictions on it. And even on the areas that we can't quite define or the things that we are unsure about, we can figure that out by requiring a full independent health and environmental impact survey from any company looking to build a data center, hyperscale or otherwise. As Susie mentioned, we are not anti-data center. We need them to run our communities. We need them to run our technology. We do not need hyperscale data centers. We need normal, moderate to small size data centers. That is what we have been running on, and that is what we can currently run on. So if we are going to open the door for data center development, let's do it safely and respecting our community members. Alongside that, we are asking to make the definitions in the ordinances both meaningful and quantifiable, and above all else, enforceable. How are we going to hold external companies accountable for the actions that they're taking? How are we going to manage their water? How are we going to manage the electricity that they pull from our grid? How are we going to prioritize our own hospitals and community members given an outage or a water shortage or drought or whatever that looks like? Ordinances in place to define, definitions in place to define ordinances are key here. And that's what we're asking for, and that's why we are so glad that you are having these discussions. Thank you so much for allowing public input and for considering a citizen advisory board. We would highly encourage that, and we would be so thankful if you did so. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Amanda Kendall. I live here in Sioux Falls. I am the chair of Let Sioux Falls Vote. I'm also a local business owner. I want to thank you for your time tonight and the work that you're putting in currently. I know that this is a very complex topic and there are no simple solutions for complex things. So thank you. I especially want to thank you for considering a creation of a public advisory board. That could be a really meaningful step towards building trust, ensuring the people who live within these decisions have an opportunity to help shape them. I'm here tonight, a part of a coalition that includes Let Sioux Falls Vote, South Dakota for Data Center Transparency, Dakota Rural Action, and many concerned citizens. We bring different backgrounds, experiences, and areas of knowledge to this work, but we share the same goal, making sure the public is informed, respected, and meaningfully included. Our coalition has been working incredibly hard since January. We have spent hundreds of hours researching these issues, gathering information, organizing community meetings, creating educational materials, and helping residents understand what is happening in their local government. We have worked to make complicated information easier for people to understand. We have shared meeting dates, public documents, answer questions, and help residents prepare clear and effective public input. We have also encouraged people to show up, listen, remain respectful, and to participate in a way that helps move the conversation forward. This work has required a great deal of time, care, and cooperation. We have brought together residents with different political beliefs and different levels of experience. Some people have been involved in local government for years, others are attending a public meeting for the first time. Every person deserves access to accurate information and a fair opportunity to be heard. We have also taken the responsibility of providing accurate information seriously. When we do not know the answer to something, we do not just guess. We take the question with us, research it, and look for reliable information. Our coalition has gathered studies, public record, government reports, university research, and information from other communities that have already dealt with similar developments. We would be glad to provide those materials to the commissioners. We are not asking you to rely on rumors, social media posts, or unsupported claims. We want to provide facts, studies from legitimate sources that can be reviewed and verified. We're also willing to help organize that information and connect the commission with knowledgeable people who can provide additional insight. We understand that these decisions are complicated. We understand commissioners must review a great deal of information and consider different perspectives. We are not here to make your work more difficult. We're offering to make a constructive resource in this process. The people in our coalition have already demonstrated that we are willing to do the work. We have continued showing up. We have continued researching. We have continued educating the community. We have continued encouraging respectful participation, even when people feel strongly about what is happening. Public trust is built when residents can see that their involvement matters before decisions are finalized. It's difficult for people to feel included when they are only asked to respond after most of the important work has already been done. A public advisory board could help change that. It could create space where community members, experts, local officials, and organizations can bring information forward, identify concerns, and discuss possible solutions while there is still time for that input to make a difference. For an advisory board to be meaningful, it must include real community representation. It should include people who have been doing the research, attending meetings, educating residents, and maintaining a direct relationship with the people who will be affecting. Our coalition has truly earned a spot at that table. We are not saying that every person involved must agree with us. We don't expect every conversation to be easy, but a good public process should include different opinions. We are prepared to participate in good faith. We're ready to listen, learn, share reliable information, and help find responsible solutions. We can bring research, community perspectives, and months of direct experience working with residents in this process. We respectfully ask you to move forward with creating a public advisory board and to include our coalition as part of it. We believe we can provide real value to the commissioners and help create a process the public can trust. Thank you again for considering a strong role for the community. Decisions of this size should not simply be presented to the residents once the work is finished. They should be shaped with the people who live with the outcome. We have been doing this work since January, and we're committed to continuing it. We are ready to work with you. I do have to say, I respect you guys a great deal, and public service is not easy. I genuinely really appreciate you even bringing up the opportunity for that, and I really, really would like to be at that table with you guys. Thank you, and I know that this is complicated. We're trying our best to make sure that you guys are educated in this process, so thank you.
Good evening. My name is Byron Peterson, and I'm relatively new to the Sioux Falls area, having moved here from up northeastern part of the state. And I understand perfectly that being on a commission, you probably never realized how much value you were getting for your dollar when you were getting that little check for all the comments that come in your direction. However, I would like to just encourage, again, the advisory committee, because I dare say there wasn't anybody in this room that knew about the sound until this lady here commented about the sound waves and all that stuff, and you could just get additional professional advice and counsel in different areas. I'd also like to encourage that when it comes to a bond, that it not be a bond that is treated lightly. I think we all remember what happened out at Holden State Mine when there was the bond, and it was such a low level, it didn't take care of any of the environmental issues. Plus, when the company just declares bankruptcy, the county and the residents are left holding the bag for cleaning it up. And in terms of a space, or a distance requirement, if you want to have bees, you're going to have beehives. You've got to have 2 miles between where you have the next beehive and stuff like that. So I think you can certainly, if you can set a distance limit on where beehives are, you can certainly set a distance limit in terms of where the data centers are located, even if they are the minor ones. So thank you very much for listening.
Good evening. Thank you for the time. My name is Amanda Potter, and I'm a resident of Sioux Falls. I'm also a candidate for the South Dakota House in District 9, serving Western Sioux Falls and Hartford. And I just wanted to say that upon first look, these seem like adequate and reasonable guidelines. However, I would encourage you to not just pass adequate guidelines, but robust guidelines. I would say exceptionally robust guidelines to protect us. As you well know, you are one of the few safeguards to protect us, along with City Council, along with the state legislature. You are standing between us and these out-of-state multi-billion-dollar companies who seek to profit from our land and our resources. No one here, I think I can speak for us all, but I will say no one here will be upset if the bar is set prohibitively high for hyperscale data centers. And so I would just encourage you to keep that in mind as you create these guidelines. And thank you.
Hi, my name is Megan Cheddar, and I am also a District 9. I am primary candidate for the Republican Party, and I represent myself, my business, and the people in Minnehaha County. I am just asking you to keep these parameters strict, just the same as the previous commenters. I have a very big concern about the sound. The thing that I heard while knocking many doors in District 9 in the primary was that the people are highly concerned. I heard it repeatedly. It was the #1 topic that came up at most of the doors. So I'm just asking you to listen to the community. I thank you for what you're doing. I thank you for talking about, and hopefully you will make a citizen advisory board. I do think that's a good thing. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Coonery. I live in Minnehaha County, and thank you again for allowing us to speak. I speak on a couple different things. One has not been addressed so far, but first of all, I think that it's very important to make that distinction between traditional data centers and hyperscale, and there are objective measures, I think. One is power, because you can go out there and search and find out. Traditional data centers typically don't use a few megawatts up to 25, something like that. The smallest hyperscale is probably going to be more like 50 megawatts up to the one they're trying to build out here, up to 500, up to gigawatts. And with that power increase, that's going to increase the amount of noise, because you have to have cooling. You have to have other things that are involved in that. You also, 53 years ago, I was in the United States Army. I was trained as a radiologic technologist. And in addition to training on ionizing radiation, X-ray and so forth, we were also trained on non-ionizing radiation, EMF radiation. And before the meeting that they had for the city council, I actually went out to that site to find out what it was, and I had an EMF meter. And I would encourage somebody from the planning to go out there, because right now with those current high power lines coming there. If you are on the 6 Mile Road, you are actually, if you were living that close, you would be exceeding what was recommended healthy levels of EMF radiation, which there are many papers that show the health impacts, including to developing children. So that is very important. So the power amount it defines hyperscale. Also water usage, even though this Gemini says they're planning closed loop, that does not mean that they aren't going to use a tremendous amount every year. And as someone already said, that is contaminated water. It could be 600 to almost 1 million gallons of contaminated water that is in those very high-end GPUs. GPUs are like very expensive CPUs. And because these GPUs have to be rotated out every 2 to 3 years, if you have 350,000 GPUs in this size, we don't know exactly, but that's approximately there would. That means 1/3 of those GPUs are going to have to be taken out. They'll have to be drained, and you're going to have very contaminated water with these chemicals in it that has to be treated responsibly. They cannot just dump this down. We know that. They better know that. That I heartily encourage you to put that in your ordinances. Also, I would say that data center builders, they're going to be pounding any roads around there and probably destroying them. So anybody that builds them must pay for restoration. Taxpayers shouldn't be doing that. And so I would encourage that you make separate plans for traditional data centers, which we don't see as a problem. These hyperscales have many more. And we could go into many more things having to do what they're using these for. But I think that those are the main things that I wanted to cover. And thank you again.
Hello, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Tessa Schwanz. I'm the current District 9 House representative. During the last legislative session, this was a topic that was very heated and very discussed highly within the legislative session. I, for one, am really happy to see that you're coming up with this definition and the layout of what that's going to look like for the public and for people to have guidelines coming in for potential data centers. There's a couple of things that I just kind of looked at, if I could potentially just give a little bit of a suggestion here. Number one, when you're talking about the megawatts, and I think having clear definition in that first sentence would be really good to have some clear guidelines as far as what's a gigawatt, what's a megawatt, and what we would not allow to be exceeded within this parameter. So example, 1,000 kilowatts is equal to 1 megawatt. 1,000 megawatts is equivalent to 1 gigawatt. So if you're looking at like Amazon and Google, they usually run between 50 and 200 megawatts. So if you put some very clarifying language in there as far as what the megawatt acceptance level would be, I think that would be really a good addition into that language. Another thing is when you're looking at the noise levels, of course, there's a couple of people that came up and talked about the noise levels. And I do think that that's a very huge concern for our citizens. And I think that that should be very clearly defined in that particular section, which is section 3 under the noise. So another part I thought could potentially be is when you're talking about the design and massing standards, when they were talking about the water pressure. That right now the water pressure in our county is low. So, how are we going to address that? And I think we should have very clear definitions of what that's going to look like so that we preserve our water for our citizens first. Our citizens should always come first. The other part is the drainage and stormwater management plan. My suggestion, take it for what it's worth, that any damages that occur, that the data center facility is going to be responsible for cleanup, repair, and to rebuild, that needs to be completely clarified and understood, that it's not going to fall to the city or the county or the citizens, that's going to fall onto the data center itself. And I think the last one, as far as a suggestion, is that they, let me see here, is in the emergency response plan, which is in the last section, that they will absorb, again, all the costs, and it's not going to fall on the taxpayer, that they're going to absorb all the costs, that it's going to get fixed, reimbursed if any damages occur, and that the emergency calls and agencies are not going to absorb that cost, that should be absorbed into the data centers. So I just want to thank you guys again for all of your hard work. I know this is probably not an easy task, and I know it's late, and I'm sure you guys are getting really tired. I just want to thank you all for your time, and I want to thank all the great people of Minnehaha County for coming up here and expressing their voice. Oh, one more thing. I too agree that we should have a citizen advisory board. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Chase Jensen. I live in Southwest Sioux Falls. So I tell my friends I have the best spot in the state. I pay Lincoln County taxes and have Sioux Falls traffic. No, I appreciate you guys. Again, I also am with Dakota Rural Action. I want to thank you, as everyone has, for getting ahead of the ball on this. This is obviously a huge topic. We'll just be repeating what everyone has said. Very grateful to have the proactive approach. A couple of thoughts that came to mind, having followed this issue at the legislative session and then also kind of tracking around the state, Vermilion, Yankton, Rapid City, a couple initiated ordinances going on throughout the state. A few things that have come up that I would think might be worth looking into a little more. A lot of the companies are promising closed loop, like water treatment. I suggest mandating that, and don't ask me more questions about these terms, but there are things as water usage effectiveness and power usage effectiveness, which gets to the public transparency of how much they're actually using. And there's also the efficiency on the electrical side, where I think there are rules that have been developed around the country or being developed that could be looked into. I think the reporting piece is excellent. I think doing it more often than a year, if they're tracking those numbers, could be helpful. I sort of have a question about the 10-year plan for the stormwater. I feel like our weather events are getting more regular. The more extreme ones are becoming more regular. We've just had that huge water event in the last couple of years here. And so if we are putting in if I'm putting a retaining wall in my own home, I'm not going to do it based on a 10-year plan. It's going to be the 100-year flood type thing. So that might be worth bumping up a little bit. Something I've seen in Vermilion, I think from the draft text that they released, was they were actually mapping out kind of to Commissioner Kipley's point, the variance of sizes of these facilities. The current ordinance as drafted has all commercial and both the industrial zones available. I think in Vermilion, they're mapping that out based on the size of the facility. So 0 to maybe 10 megawatts could be commercial, 10 to 25 could be light industrial, and then above that, I think there's also a lot of interest in developing a new zoning category, particularly for these huge facilities. I think also to another point that was brought up, if something gets rezoned for light industrial for a 500 megawatt facility, well then anything else light industrial, it can be used for that. So having something more specific for the size of the projects that we've been hearing about could be helpful. The last couple pieces here quick are a question in my mind of the jurisdiction of your guys' role, the county's role, the PUC, the state, but with electrical, in the event there's a grid emergency, I don't know who the right body of government is that would mandate they are the first user to be shut off in a grid emergency. relative to communities or schools. But if there is a role, I think it's a question worth asking, because I think most groups are going to assume it's the PUC, and the PUC says we don't touch this. So somebody's going to have to claim it, and would be worth checking in on. And then the last thing is just, I feel like what we saw from my reading in the Cheyenne, Wyoming spill, where the water was contaminated and it got out. I think it was a meta facility, if I remember that right. The fee, or like the penalty, was like $10,000, which is like, they can just wrap that into their business plan, you know? And so I think having the conditional use permit is excellent, because there's actually teeth to it. You can pull that back. But I think we want to make sure that the protections in place are actually going to prompt, you know, that they follow them. So if that means there's more frequent reporting on the usage, then hopefully that can help compliance with some of the rules that are set. So thank you all, and yeah, appreciate the work you're putting into it.
Hi, I'm Melanie Sam, and I live at 5300 East Lake Placid Circle. I'm going to be short. I live in the area there, and in the last 5 years, we've had a lot of outages. My biggest concern is if a data center goes in, are we going to have even more outages than what we do already? That's my biggest concern, because it would affect my life and my neighbors' lives. Okay, thank you.
Okay, since everybody's made their comments, the commission appreciates your comments and your suggestions, and we will continue the process. Any other new business, Scott?
No.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone.